It really doesn't recognize, oh, you're upset, even though you're smiling. We're not here to protect the technology. We're here to protect people. There will always be problems in the world. There will always be problems with the future. But I like to remember that there is a great deal that is right with the future.
Hello, and welcome to Independence Avenue Media. My name is Glenn Cates, and I'm excited to be joined today by Richard Yonck, a Futurist author who has spent decades exploring how humanity and technology evolve. Richard, thanks for joining me.
It's my pleasure, Glenn. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
This year, you wrote, I believe, a 10-year audit of your own book, Heart of the Machine. And that book, which came out before the AI revolution, explored the ability of machines to replicate human emotion. And as anyone who has used ChatGPT as a therapist knows, this is not science fiction. And so I wanted to ask you, what did you get right about artificial emotional intelligence in 2016, and what did you miss?
In 2016, in the middle of the last decade, there was still a lot of excitement on the part of various players around what emotion AI could do. Artificial emotional intelligence later became known much more as emotion AI. It had a lot of different potential for uses and applications in a range of spaces, from education to healthcare to human resources and so forth. In the interim, a number of things have changed. Some of that has a lot to do with our changing attitudes in society around privacy. I think people have become much more concerned and aware about what is essentially involved in being monitored in our world by sensors, cameras, microphones, what have you. And so we're seeing more and more efforts at creating safeguards around this space that really wasn't happening at that time. In terms of the developments, a lot of things have developed, but understand that in my writing it, in looking at the world as a futurist, I was looking a lot further out than just simply 10 years. 10 years is actually, in terms of technologies, a fairly short time frame. It takes literally decades for uh, different technologies to go from conception, very early stages, to various forms of development, finally to be adopted into the world. This is speeding up, most certainly, but you can only do so much around the space of how much can we leapfrog certain technologies and be able to build it to essentially meet our timelines.
You've written about the growing ability of state actors to, for instance, manipulate public sentiment, to interfere and influence elections. You wrote about something you called them real-time persuasion loops and autonomous social engineering. Concretely, to bring it back to this topic, what does emotion-aware AI add to a foreign state actor's toolkit that they wouldn't have had several years ago?
So essentially, where AI, emotion AI was 10, 15 years ago was very much a single channel kind of concept. Could we read a face and label a particular expression as meaning a particular emotion and so forth? One, this is problematic, but it also led eventually, as everything developed, to taking much more of a multi-channel approach. You're listening to sentiment in the voice and the text, the words. You're looking at faces, you're looking at posture and gesture, and able to create more of a picture of what how that person may be responding or feeling. This is important because one of the shortfalls of emotion AI early on and still, is that it really doesn't understand. It really doesn't recognize, oh, you're upset, even though you're smiling. Uh, what we do as human beings is we utilize something that psychologists refer to as theory of mind. Essentially, we are projecting and modeling what we believe is going on in the mind of the person that we're interacting with. And AI can't do this, but it can make create a better picture for itself very rapidly on the fly that emulates this to a degree, and that makes it much more powerful and potentially much more dangerous. So if you're interacting as an avatar, perhaps a very, very realistic avatar, on a webcam interview or what have you, you might create a an interaction that is more detrimental to that individual. Perhaps, as we have, many of us have heard, there have been situations where members of companies have been convinced that they're talking to the CEO or a board or what have you, and told to issue certain funds to somebody or some place, and lo and behold, they're out of millions of dollars. So yeah, it's real, and the question becomes, how far can it go, and how can we protect ourselves?
Yeah, I'd like to talk actually about how you actually defend against something like that. Like, if you could think about that, what's being done to protect people from these nefarious uses of, particularly of emotion in AI?
Emotion AI is only one piece of that puzzle, but it is an important one. Perhaps being that little extra few percent of nudge that something can benefit by, essentially a form, and let's call it an advanced form of social engineering. In the case of what can we do, we talk about education and informing the public. That's useful and great, but can only go so far. We evolved as a species to recognize other creatures that are similar to us, that essentially talk like us, and we're in a period where we really can very quickly fall into a role of, or a hole of thinking we're talking to something that's real, even if we start off pretend, behaving like, oh wait, we know, we've been informed that this is a artificial, actor, avatar, what have you. But we quickly forget this as we're interacting with them. This goes all the way back to something like Weizenbaum's Eliza chatbot from 1964 at MIT. You had people who knew darn well it was a chatbot, and yet they would talk to it about their deepest, darkest secrets. So it's something that we're someplace we're vulnerable. There need to be ways that we can alert the user, have some type of technology that is essentially the equivalent of our currently AI detection for text. We can read certain passages and say, oh, this was AI generated, this is not. To be able to do something like that on the fly with real time interactions, and then be able to flag the user, in that way. That's still a little ways off, I would certainly say. There's a lot of challenges to it. It'll probably, like everything else, lead to a little bit of a quote arms race around the systems, finding ways around that, the detection having to get better, and so forth. We've seen this with everything from antivirus to other types of technology responses and so forth in the world.
What about government regulation? I think you've written in the past about the EU AI Act,
Mhm.
and it's something that in Washington there's been some skepticism about. Um, is that something that you think could be? Is the government able to effectively regulate AI?
I'd say currently no, right now. In the case of the government regulating. There's always the worry and the problem of overreach. When we talk about recognizing a problem in a new technology, we routinely have legislation being a slower process by design, tends to fall behind. And then by the time that it actually catches up and deals with a problem, there's often some level of regulatory overreach before it kind of homes in on somewhere that's a little bit more reasonable.
Mm.
I personally believe that what they're doing in the EU is actually beneficial because essentially we have to recognize that these standards have to serve people. We're not here to protect the technology. We're here to protect people. So there has to be some realization, recognition of this. In the case of how things are currently being done in the US, I consider it a little too laissez-faire. Essentially, we need to not be looking only to support the businesses that are creating these, but also the end users, the people who ultimately can potentially become very vulnerable. I like the idea of having certain levels of check along the way, and yet this technology is developing so rapidly that it's really a challenge to figure out how this is going to be done.
So you're a futurist, so I have to ask you a question about the future. And it's something that you obviously are still writing about. Um, you wrote in a recent post that this bigger is better mindset of some of the well-known actors, OpenAI, Google, NVIDIA, building the big data centers. You said that it could potentially be a dead end. And you've pointed instead to figures like Jan LeCun, who are betting on something almost completely different.
So to begin, yes, um, I've been a lot of people consider AI to be something fairly new. A lot of the public, for instance, consider it to be something they've only become really aware of in the past, let's call it 10 years and probably less than that. The reality is it's been around for close to a century, depending on where you want to call where it starts from. Technology takes longer than people think it does, and then on top of that, it doesn't recognize or respect your quarterly report. It really needs to be done in the time it takes. Now, in terms of the model we're currently in, the paradigm we're currently in with LLMs, generative AI, and so forth, unfortunately, it in my mind, it will hit a dead end. It is something that is based on language, and I mean, not just language, but it's a big part of it. Our intelligence is so much more than just language and communication. It is so many other things that involve our experience of the world, which we'll come to in a minute. But in terms of continuing to scale being the answer to how we make LLMs better, I think that there's a real diminishing point of returns coming here. And we really, I don't see that that is going to get us where I think a lot of people think it will. And by a lot of people, it's being driven by a lot of hype out of a number of these companies. In terms of where we go next, I don't necessarily believe it's the end chapter. I think similarly, the next paradigm is a next step, but not necessarily the last one. But you referenced spatial AI. This is kind of, let's call it a subset of something much larger, which is, as I will call experiential AI. This is a direction that people like Jan LeCun with world models and his company AMI and JEPA have, are moving toward. Instead of learning or building their knowledge set from text and really not having a true understanding and ability to understand causality and so forth, what they do is these models instead are seeking to learn from experience, much like a young child does, much like all of us did early in our lives. Now, this is still very early days. This is this is not going to, come about and be uh, more than proof of concept in 5 years. But it is moving in a direction that I think gets us closer to how we think, how human beings uh, and other animals actually exist and learn in the world. I think that's really where the next chapter um, is likely to go.
Help me draw a picture a little bit about what an AI learning through something tantamount to human experience would be in practical terms. Is there an example of something like that's happening right now, for instance?
Sure. So you can talk about it in terms of simulations taking place in a computer where you essentially have interactions that are intended to build from very, very basic component, let's call it components, but actions and so forth. That's one version of this. But if you think about a robot, some form of embodied AI interacting with a coworker, interacting in an environment where it's learning the ground and how it falls when certain things happen. And this is essentially building a model of physics that is much closer to how a child might learn from its world. These are different approaches to, and they can eventually overlap and inform each other. These are different approaches that can ultimately help the system to build a model that is based in causality, based in context, that the current models simply don't have. They can pretend, they can make you think that they have an understanding of what they're referencing and talking about, but I can promise you that ChatGPT, Claude, any of the others, have no concept of what a rose smells like or what it feels like to touch someone's hand or to look at a sunset. These are all experiences, and this is something very far from where these technologies are today.
Your newsletter is called What's Right with the Future. We've just discussed some things today that are not particularly right with AI. And I just wanted to ask you, what do you think? What is right with the future?
Yes, one of my newsletters, which is on LinkedIn, and I suppose it's on Medium as well. Uh, Essentially, I wanted to emphasize that for all the things that I say are wrong, that people say are wrong with how the world is developing, the fact is that we live in an amazing world that is the result of our coevolution with technology for hundreds of thousands, actually 4 million years. And this has gone on from the point we were an unassuming primate on the savannah as Australopithecus all the way to now when we're essentially a globe spanning species. And that's in evolutionary terms, that is a blink of an eye. What has allowed that to happen is our ability to build and create technologies that have accelerated and augmented our intelligence, allowing us to transcend time and space to share knowledge across the world, across generations. And this is huge in terms of how it has allowed us to build as a society, as a community. And it really has overall created a world in which we're safer, more prosperous, certainly healthier, and so forth. This is incredible power that this relationship has allowed us to build. So, from my standpoint, uh, we're living in a very, very good time. There will always be problems in the world. There will always be problems with the future. But I like to remember that there is a great deal that is right with the future.
And just to respond to that point, I mean, what would you say as someone bring that positive message? How would you respond to people who say it definitely doesn't feel right now?
Right. Nothing in this world has developed, happened, been improved without people feeling that, gee, it could be better. It's not the way I want it. and so forth. This is really what's driven progress. If everything was hunky dory from early on in history, we probably would have just sat around and accomplished nothing. The fact is that it is need, it's want, it's the desire for something better that has created this loop, this cycle in which we invent, we build better institutions and so forth, and essentially this is for ourselves and for future generations.
Richard Yonck, thank you very much for joining me today.
It's been a pleasure, Glenn. Thank you so much for having me.